So my film is called Knives and Skin. It's going to screen this Friday and Saturday. We shot it in and around Chicago with an entirely Chicago-based crew, a totally Chicago-based cast. It's supposed to take place generally in the Midwest, so it's not supposed to take place necessarily in Chicago, but it is a Chicago film. So Knives and Skin is, it really is about trauma in a small town. And which I think, in a way, it's why it gets connected to Twin Peaks. It also has some kind of surreal elements, and it really uses the horror sort of genre, as a curtain to talk about aspects of female empowerment, to talk about consent, to talk about coming of age as a lifelong process. I mean, I would say the social justice element comes in terms of talking about female empowerment and female friendships and the experiences of young girls and teenage girls and consent among young girls and the kind of horror, the everyday horror of being a young girl just trying to kind of navigate your life every day and dealing with adults who have nothing, their interest is in disrupting your human evolution. It feels so cool to be part of something this kind of international, but it's in my own backyard. Normally I'm traveling with my films, or I'm traveling to be on a jury someplace overseas, and so it's actually a change of pace to be able to go home and sleep in my own bed. What sets this festival apart from the festivals not only that are taking place like in the other cities on either coast that shall remain nameless, but cities outside of the U.S. as well. I think that Chicago, Chicago as a city itself we know who we are, right? We have like a real specific identity. We've made a decision to be here and not anyplace else, and so I think that a festival like this, it's really saying like. Again, like we have an identity, and these are the films that reflect, what we think filmmaking is right now. I think as a filmmaker, I'm not so much always looking at a film to wonder, like, how do they get that shot, or to look for errors in continuity, or some of those more technical aspects of the filmmaking. I want to know why a filmmaker chose to tell that story at that time. I just think that from my own perspective, I think of my own films as a form of social justice, and the stories that I tell, when I tell them, I want them to be, to have a real meaningful connection to the audience, So sometimes when I'm watching a film that I either feel really connected to, even if it's presenting a culture that's not my own, or someone who's not me, or someone that if I'm watching a film that I feel very not connected to, it's like the thing that I think about that maybe someone who's not a filmmaker thinks about is like, why that story about those people now? I think a lot more filmmakers who are coming from underrepresented cultures are actually the ones who are making films now. I think that the filmmaking process has gotten more accessible. It's not just that like you have to have a studio attached to make a big film that has impact. I think that you can still make a film that has a really reasonable budget with like not known actors, in a country that might not have like the most robust kind of filmmaking infrastructure, and it's still about telling a good story. And I think that right now I'm also looking at whose stories are being told. I think that that there are so many films that are in the international competition that are really presenting very varied stories, and stories about people that we don't often hear from, So it's both about like what stories are being told, but whose stories are being told. As a member of the international jury who's also a filmmaker, I feel like I'm in a really special position. I think that I look at films maybe in a different way than someone who's a critic or a writer or a programmer or a producer even, I make films. It's the way that I communicate with the world. And so, I'm not taking this opportunity for granted. I'm looking forward to seeing so many of these films that really will sort of like take us all the way around the world and are really showcasing in terms of this this collection of films. It really speaks to this festival and the stories that this festival is interested in presenting.